A study confirms that social media is linked to depression regardless of personality type. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. Published in the Journal of Affective Disorders Reports, a recent study shows that social media usage is linked to developing depression regardless of personality. Now, we all knew that social media usage was generally speaking linked to depression, but the regardless of personality piece is quite interesting. That's new, and it has many implications. To begin with, though, we have to understand what they mean by personality. In the study, they used the Big Five personality traits to aggregate that. And what are those? Well, you have openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And on any one of these measures, you can be high, low, or in the middle. So, openness is just your proclivity to try new things and to be open to that. Conscientiousness is your ability to be able to think about how your actions are affecting other people. Extroversion is, as it's written there, the ability to be outgoing, and the opposite of that would be introversion. Agreeableness is your ability to have peaceful relations with people, and the opposite of that would be a hostile demeanor, someone who is open to getting into conflict. And that might not be bad. In the workplace, that's actually one personality trait, which, if you're low in, can predict you moving up the hierarchy. And finally, neuroticism, which is your proclivity to negative emotion. If you are high in neuroticism, then small things can make you quite upset, and if you are low in neuroticism, you're fairly immune to these things. So, from the report, it says that previous research has linked the development of depression with numerous factors. However, literature has been lacking in studies that focus on how various personality characteristics may interact with social media. And further, depression. This new study addressed these important research questions, finding strong and linear associations with depression across all personality traits. Now, having said that, not all dimensions of personality react the same. Although all of them were susceptible to depression, they interacted differently. For example, people with high agreeableness, people who tend to get along with those around them, who don't seek out confrontation and they're willing to go with the flow, were 49% less likely to become depressed than people with low agreeableness. If I had to wager, it might be because those who tend to be high in agreeableness tend to be kind and compassionate and very caring. So when they're seeing things on social media of people living their best life, perhaps their initial reaction isn't one of envy, but something more akin to being happy for them. Now, if you have the opposite personality trait there, I can see why you'd be more predisposed to depression, and you should be aware of that. Maybe it means you have to tailor the type of content that you're taking in. Now, additionally, those who were high in neuroticism were twice as likely to develop depression than those with low neuroticism. Now, this is not surprising at all. Social media tends to bring out negative emotions, whether that's anger, envy, things of this nature. And if you react very strongly to that, it's not going to be good for you. Another thing to keep in mind and to know about yourself. Now, there is some more complex analysis within the study, but I do want to breeze past that to talk about the main reasons here that social media is causing depression across the board for everyone, essentially. First, social comparison. This can enhance negative feelings of oneself and others. Now, as we just talked about though, some personality types are not as susceptible to that. But it is something that is contributing to the problem. And one thing you have to know, just general advice, everyone is just posting the highlights of their life on social media. And when you compare the highlights of their life to the everyday, real world experiences that you have, of course they won't stack up because you have lowlights that you're very well aware of. Other people are not going to be posting that. So the perception's off. You may think that all your peers are living a certain type of sunshine and butterfly type living, when in reality it might not be the case. So, first of all, it's not accurate as per their situation. And just because you think it is, it's making you feel worse about your own. The truth is super muddled here, and that's actually a theme that's common across all social media. The thing that you have to know, generally speaking, is that comparison to others is always a bad idea. You just don't know the full picture there. There's only one type of comparison that makes sense. That's comparing yourself to the previous you. You know every intimate detail about that journey. Where are you now compared to where you were 5 years ago? Are you in a better place? If the answer is yes, you can be proud about that. And if you're not, well, you have some work to do, but at least that work is grounded in reality. You know where the issues are. You know the full story. Try to stay away from those social media comparisons. Another factor here that's a commonality is engaging primarily in negative content, which can then enhance negative feelings, and this is more on the neuroticism front. As I talked about, everything is sensationalized on social media. It's actually optimized for engagement. That's how the algorithm works. And what can get someone to engage with content? It's certainly not boring headlines. They have to leverage your emotions to get those clicks. They want you to be upset or energized. And in good cases, they want you to be very happy. Then you'll also be more likely to click on the content, but that's a rare exception. It's far easier to produce outrage. It's far easier to make you feel offended. This is just how the system is working on social. The algorithms are set up in a way to prioritize that type of response. Follow any news website. Follow any reporter or blogger. Now, this is more true on Twitter, I think, but just see how the conversations divulge. Even if the poster posted something that wasn't inflammatory, the comments are always going to be inflammatory. Much of social media has become a battleground. And that's obviously taken a toll on a lot of people's mental, making them feel quite bad. The real world, I don't think, is as polarized as social media may lead you to believe, even though things are quite bad. Don't get me wrong. But try not to engage in that cycle of craziness. And for all you know, maybe you're debating a bot. That's quite possible today. Then finally, the third major factor that was identified is engaging in more social media reduces opportunities for in-person interactions and activities outside the home. This, I think, has become more problematic during the pandemic. Perhaps not so much before. In fact, what was happening was people were combining social media with in-person activities. You would see it all the time. People would go out with their friends, but they'd be on their phone the whole time. So in some ways, it's defeating the purpose of in-person interaction. Too distracted by technology, which is a whole other issue. But to get back to what was identified here, especially during the pandemic, this is what happened. People were forced to isolate, to stay home. But they still longed for connection, so what did they do? They moved to things like Reddit and forums and social media and even Zoom calls and stuff like that. It's just not the same. You're connected, but you're still apart in many ways. In fact, I think that's pretty much the summary of social media. We're more connected than ever, but more isolated as well. Because we're connected in a superficial sense. We're connected in terms of followership and seeing each other's stories, but when it comes to living with each other, doing stuff together, it's just not there. And there isn't an equivalency. From a biological standpoint, the ways in which we've evolved with a sense of community, there just hasn't been enough time for evolution to capture the phenomenon of social media. The mind is wired in certain ways, and we have been deprived of that. Now, with the pandemic seemingly easing up, at least in terms of restrictions, in terms of cases, it's a whole other issue. But as the restrictions dwindle, perhaps that's one thing that we can bring back. Now, I do think Sam Harris captured this quite well when he says that the entirety of human society has been thrust into a psychological experiment and we do not know what's going to happen. Social media is a relatively new phenomenon and pretty much everyone has subscribed to it in one form or another across the globe. What does it do to people when they're spending 6 hours a day on their phone? What type of consequences comes with that? What happens when you're bombarded with advertisements on social all day, every day? What happens to young people who look up to role models who may be giving off unrealistic or downright detrimental perspectives and images for them to cling to? Now, many of these issues have been around before, in one form or another, But everything has been exacerbated through social media. The scale is just far greater than we could have imagined. Did anyone think that with the beginning of something like MySpace, we'd end up in a world today where things like TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat are the number one way that people are connecting? It really is fascinating, and studies like this are just showing the results of that experiment. Only time will tell how things will turn out, but there are legitimate questions to be posed here, and there are solutions that perhaps we have to find at the societal level. Maybe others at the governmental level, but we do have to start thinking about the issues that are cropping up here. Now with that, it does bring us to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoyed the material, be sure to leave a review and share. It'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.